Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for your interest in this. The presentation of 21st Century Librarianship, a skill set to enhance research development and competitive intelligence. This is the description that we had sent out, and I want to give a little bit of context here as to my interest is in connecting over the skills from librarianship to work in competitive intelligence and research development. It's a in-progress work. I'll be presenting a poster at NORDUP, and I'm really enjoying getting back into library literature on the topic. It's very fun to revisit some core aspects of librarianship. How I really framed this was looking at how librarians as information professionals are really trained to bring in a skill set that matches onto what we see common in competitive intelligence work. I see a chat here. Can everyone hear me now? I'll assume so. Great. So what I did was really just pull down some basic information on competitive intelligence. You know, what is, by way of the Academy of Competitive Intelligence, what does that work look like in terms of some skills? And we have here that we're looking at an ability to collect intelligence from human sources, synthesizing rather than just analyzing it, and then to be able to pull information out of it to help guide decision making. When we're looking at information professionals, a lot of this overlaps, particularly when we're looking at the emphasis on IT skills and information communication technologies, or ICTs. There's a service orientation that we'll get a little bit more into, but also some skills like language and soft skills that I think really help, or kind of when you unpack synthesizing information, it's these sorts of skills that really position one to do synthesis quite effectively. I think also the ability to contextualize oneself in their work environment is really driven by management training, and also really effective at situating competitive intelligence briefs to our leadership. So I'm working with the assumption that the majority of the people on the call are coming at this from a research development or competitive intelligence situation. I believe we may have some library colleagues on the phone, to which I say hello. And I'm introducing just some baseline information about librarianship here. This is what the American Library Association defines as core competencies to librarianship. Having really strong understanding of the profession itself, what is the value that it imparts on an organization. I'm situating us here in higher education settings where a library is part of a larger organization and is essential to research operations or research work at a university. A very strong understanding of information resources, so understanding both the technologies as well as the content that we're accessing through our technologies. Having a strong organization of recorded knowledge and information, so how having awareness as to what content is, what content looks like within any of our sources, and being able to look at the credibility and verify source credibility too. Technical knowledge and skills is something that, you know, requires, absolutely requires currency, and that is a important aspect of librarianship. to be able to deliver reference and user services, which really is answering questions, which is the core function of intelligence briefings. We're answering questions and giving tools for people to make decisions. And I think that very much aligns over to what reference services are in libraries. To be able to conduct research, I think this group very much is, in a way, doing research on competitive intelligence in higher education, and librarians are often conducting research on how their organizations situate within a larger setting. And ongoing education and lifelong learning to maintain currency in technologies and best practices, as well as an understanding of administration and management. And those core competencies were defined in the late 1990s, and the International Federation for Libraries, IFLA, is the International Federation of Library Associations, has an ongoing conversation around key aspects of librarianship and what are the trends. The most recent 2019 trend report looked at 3 trends that are prevalent in all librarianship now. And what we're looking at there is the dealing with uncertainty. So changing circumstances, and I'm quoting from the report here, changing circumstances are such as obliging governments, libraries, and individuals to reassess assumptions in order to deal with the unfamiliar. For libraries, this can mean a greater need to advocate in order to secure support, but it also means that people need information more than ever. These changes can be a source of stress and tension, but through dialogue, we can build understanding of the new situation we face and arrive at situations. And I think that this very much resonates in higher education environments at the moment. Adopting holistic approaches, so understanding the interrelation between different aspects of our lives at the individual level and between different policy areas at large scale have made it possible to see just how complicated the world really is. In order to make progress, we need to be readier to take holistic approaches. For individuals, including library and information workers, this means taking account of everything that affects how effectively people seek information and learn. For governments, cross-cutting initiatives such as the United Nations 2030 Agenda provide a model. And working at scale, so really being able to speak to how ease of access to information has enabled kind of growth in services and challenges in terms of how do we think and act to respond to this, or as they say, technology has made it easier to work at regional or even global scale than ever. Certainly, the challenges we face also require large-scale responses, but it's not always easy to think or to act beyond the local level. What does this mean for how libraries work, what they can achieve both in their efforts to enhance professional practice and to win support from decision makers? What is necessary to make this sort of large-scale cooperation into an instinct for libraries? I think my slides got a little jumbled here between my desktop and here. But what we're looking at is, how the skills of librarians really can play a role as information professionals outside of libraries. And, challenging to abstract over to what, aside from being a librarian, roles a librarian can serve, particularly in relation to research and higher education. When we're looking at how librarians are, the training and skills of librarians and the roles that they provide. This is a wonderful image from an article, Libraries, A Call to Build the Action Agenda, or Blended Skills and Future Roles of Librarians. We can see the interrelations of where libraries have been, where librarians have been, and kind of what's going on here. We see a range of roles that librarians have traditionally filled, which really goes well into the spaces of higher education, publishing, and libraries, but with research development and competitive intelligence in higher education being a relatively newer space, with less than, or just over a decade of existence by way of NORDUP. We don't really see that yet present in the conversation of librarians. And this is what I'm hoping to focus a little bit more time over the upcoming year in teasing out. We can really see that these values or drivers that revolve around open access, around professionalism, around understanding policy and understanding information communication technologies, to be both a creator, an intermediary, and a knowledge user can really be something to enhance our work in research development and competitive intelligence. The work that has been done in libraries has long had impacts that are really similar to the sort of work and impact that we see in research development and competitive intelligence. And with there not really being much literature that connects the two, this is definitely a space to explore. Beyond where librarians have training and professional positioning to excel in competitive intelligence work, there are some really just core underlying aspects to librarians. I think that this is, if you have time to get to this article and have an interest in on looking at how personality traits connect to professional identities and the implications that that has for work, it's a really great space. And I'm working to connect over how common personality traits of LIS professionals fall or have a really good Venn diagram with the sort of commentary that we see around competitive intelligence work and research development. Specifically, the authors of an article, Distinctive 16 Personality Factor Personality Traits for Librarians, made a series of 8 hypotheses to get an understanding of what a comprehensive personality, how a comprehensive personality instrument can help us to understand how a personality well intersects with a professional identity and how that might lend itself to success in a professional role. In looking at 16 dimensions of personality, the authors were really able to dive into 8 different factors of personality that they felt were probably the most reflective of librarianship, and I think that these all really connect well over to competitive intelligence. There's an emphasis on having a low dominance, which would be associated with being deference, tact, amenability, and a willingness to accommodate. That would be kind of well connected over to service orientation and to coordination, and having an eye towards being able to speak to various audiences. There was also an assumption and proof that introspectiveness that we typically see in is a trait that we typically see with librarians, and we could see as being an asset in competitive intelligence and research development work, where we're looking at having high levels of concentration and focus on technical matters, as well as having a real metered personality trait, so very high on self-control. There's a considerable presence of cautiousness and heedfulness associated with low social boldness that we see with librarians, and that could be quite helpful in work as research development and competitive intelligence professionals, where we are going to maybe be a little more keen to parse what requests are coming of us and to be able to think of all stakeholders as we develop responses. You know, librarians have a really high association with trust as a foundational attribute for creating and maintaining positive working relationships with others. I think this maps well onto how we work with leadership and in response to institutional requests that can really have high stakes in terms of decisions. There's also interest in how librarians work with privacy and confidentiality, the priorities, the highly prioritized role that plays in libraries, how librarians work with change, innovation, and navigating new experiences, and how this positions librarians to be very successful information professionals. And that change specifically in libraries is being able to understand that change can be an external factor that we can anticipate, that we can navigate positively and use to our benefit to plan forward and to navigate outcomes as they surface. And then finally, there was of the 8 personality factors that the authors honed in on, an eye towards librarians' association with being perfectionist, precise, organized, and detailed, all of which are assets when we're thinking about developing intelligence briefs. That, you know, the need to be accurate and authoritative in our work is key. Where I've now been working primarily in the literature is around what we call 21st century skills. You know, 21st century skills are something that in my training is in earning my LIS was something that was a blend of talking about information literacy, digital literacy, media literacy, but where the P21 framework for 21st century learning really pivots back and starts to talk about how 21st century skills are a newer set of skills that really pivot away from kind of disciplinary expertise, but the sort of savviness on being able to leverage the tools in our environment to be able to effectively answer questions and navigate challenges. Where I really see this having a connection over to competitive intelligence and research development is primarily in being able to vet information media and technology skills, or leverage information media and technology skills to be able to effectively navigate source material and to do a higher order job in synthesizing information that we're pulling out of authoritative sources to drive better reporting. There's a growing, there's a pretty well-established set of literature in library and information science. Really have a lot to get through with this, to be looking at how information literacy maps over to 21st century skills, and really how to connect this to competitive intelligence and research development work. There's in surveying literature, library and information science has the longest running record of research and action on information literacy. The field views it as a specialized skill set and is something that can be employed in professional settings. There's a growing piece of literature on information literacy in the workplace that's particularly situated in business librarianship and special librarianship. How does one, as a librarian embedded in a corporate setting, navigate conveying the need to be information literate while also being well aware of their surrounding? There is the start of a higher education context. I've just started to pick up on this thread recently with a 2008 articles, the start of my path on it, where it's workplace information literacy for administrative staff in higher education. There's it connects over how higher education professionals mirror that of business professionals and really start to explore how that being information literate is essential to one's job performance. And this is what I'll be working to connect between bodies of literature between now and the Nordic conference in May. I realized that this was a little ill-formed. I'm kind of at the very front end of working this into a poster for the idea showcase, and wanted to do a little bit more than just say, why I think competitive intelligence and research development connect well to librarianship. I bring my experience of N=1. I received my MLIS in 2013 and pursued coursework for a PhD with an emphasis on how telecommunications policy influences content, which I view as, essentially tied to being able to assess and verify sources for work and intelligence briefs, but have never done the legwork to be able to give any authority to that claim. And this, this slide deck, the literature that I'll be working on as the literature review as well as a poster, I'll be happy to share. Really trying to do a close comparison of professions. Unfortunately, this time there really is little written about research development from outside of research development, but there are some pieces. If there are any people who have thoughts as to where there might be literature of value in my work here, I'd love to hear from you. And I'm trying to identify opportunity spaces. I am in good contact with my alma mater from my library degree, and have been talking about how much value there is to orienting upcoming professionals in this field to opportunities outside of libraries. Libraries are not seeing the hiring rates that had been anticipated more than a decade ago, and as a result, there are a lot of opportunities for young professionals to start on a new path. And I think it also is an opportunity from professional fields like competitive intelligence and research development to be looking at a set of new talent who come to the table with some very well-developed skills in areas that can be well employed and almost deployable anywhere. This is where the 21st century skills and literacies really map across and can be leveraged well for early career research development and competitive intelligence professionals. I know that that's kind of on the short end for presentations within the group, but I still have a lot of reading to do here and look forward to reporting out more in May. I'd really love feedback here and welcome questions so that this can help guide me as I continue the work and also be responsive to what people are interested in reading about as related to it. I assume there had to have been a layer of interest if that guided you to attending this today. So with that, I'll pause and hopefully we can have some interaction here. So any and all questions welcome. Checking the chat window.
Hi Ryan, this is Jamie. I just wanted to say thank you. That was very insightful. I'm actually very excited for May to kind of see where this leads you. And then I just wanted to put out there to everyone, feel free to unmute yourselves. You are currently muted when you signed on to the call, so if you have questions, go ahead and unmute.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Alba McIntyre from OSU. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Alba.
Thanks for presenting today, because actually you're filling in for Derek that couldn't present today. So thanks so much for that. And I have a couple of questions for you. So for us that work in the competitive intelligence, a lot of our initial defining the project we work with or work on is to actually scope the problem. So the client comes with a request, and we have to analyze that request, basically extract keywords or concepts from that request and expand on those on that concept to be able to give an adequate answer to the question. Is this what you're telling me, is that librarians would be able to help me with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
To give a very N=1 example, when I started in my role, I came in with a pretty healthy understanding of science and technology studies, approaches to telecommunications policy, pretty narrow space, and was quickly deployed to work on information requests surrounding material science, which I had no background in. But through being able to pivot across our researchers' body of literature and knowing which tools were available from our library, I was able to assemble a really good keyword understanding of what material science we specifically were looking at this university, and then be able to do comparisons to the universities that our leadership had prioritized in terms of how that material science work looked elsewhere, to gain some understanding as to how spaces differed. And then also to be able to, my space is less on intelligence, it is part of my work, but also in a little bit more research development, really use that to guide the sort of searching that I was doing for funding mechanisms that would be 1 to 2 years out for our researchers to be able to prepare for.
Okay. I have one more question, actually. So if I'm looking for a librarian here inside OSU to help me with that, what would be the title of this librarian? It wouldn't be an impact librarian, or is there such a classification, a job title or something that would help me reach out to that person?
Yeah, in a place that I really didn't get into with this presentation, I didn't feel appropriate doing so without having surveyed the literature well. And there's a growing body of it around bibliometrics librarians.
Right.
The metrics of impact of scholarly work is a very rich area to explore. I think that we kind of got into this somewhat with our last call. And evaluation or assessment or bibliometric librarians can be really great partners in not only navigating what these metrics mean and how we can employ them, but also might have some really great insights as to where we would want to look for information, how we would want to look at the scholarly body and get to the most credible sources to use in our work.
I hate to bust your bubble, Ryan, but our bibliometric librarian would not be able to do this. So there has to be someone else that fits this profile, but not that one. And that's about my questions. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that's going to vary.
Yep.
Locally at the University of Pittsburgh, that is where I intersected best with our library system. And where we diverged, I ended up working closer with our digital scholarship librarians. And I think this bridges a little bit of maybe more my research development practices more than my intelligence practices. But I found a lot of value there too, particularly when we're talking about emergent activity. You know, where are our white papers gaining traction and being read in social media, for example? Our librarians in digital scholarship are more closely dialed into altmetrics and talking about that. And I think that's kind of when I'm looking at finding funding information for what's happening now, it's less what's been published and more what's in pre-publication.
Thanks, Ryan.
This is Connie Stovall from Virginia Tech. I just wanted to tack on to that a little bit. I'm currently doing much of what he is speaking of here as well. And I can say, at least from my standpoint, these are developing roles. I certainly didn't have a title that would just stand out to everybody. It really began as an interest of my own. In conjunction with a team that is much like sponsored programs and tech transfer and business development. And it really started with starting to utilize many of the tools that I would use for teaching faculty, but then add the analysis and the synthesis onto it. So I think part of that is, you know, finding people within libraries or even recruiting from the outside, people who would be interested in developing these roles.
And I want to build, thank you, Connie. That's, you kind of said what I couldn't there. It's been a conversation here, and maybe you can relate to this, and I think it's come up in other conversations, that talking about competitive intelligence as research development activity with our libraries has involved some level of walking back institutional research as the object of focus in the conversation. I think our institutional research relationship with bibliometric librarians is really strong here. But in terms of research development, that alone was newish enough within the university, never mind forging a relationship with the libraries, and that's been something that's underway.
Jamie, I guess there's a question from Mark.
Yeah, Ryan, there's a question in the chat from Mark that says, can you talk more about competitive intelligence for those of us who are not librarians?
Yes, and I'm also going to lean a bit to you and Alba on this. You have roles that are very much dedicated to competitive intelligence. Competitive intelligence is a piece of the work that I do and lies much more in terms of doing briefs, very short briefs for our leadership that would mostly be tied to specific funding opportunities, where I'm looking at what our internal selection looks like, how it maps onto a funding mechanism, and who's been successful in it before. But that's a very narrow activity of competitive intelligence in higher ed setting. May I defer to you and Alba on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So here at ASU, we have kind of a standard definition that we use, in that competitive intelligence being the ethical collection of data to provide our stakeholders actionable insights. And so that's kind of what we're all about here, is taking mass amounts of information, whether it be information on publications, funding, anything really, and turning that into something that our stakeholders can quickly go through and make decisions from. And so we do that in a number of contexts in terms of, funding for research opportunities, funding around specific topics, examining just, what's going on at our university, the capacity. We also do look at publications, but I think growing our role with librarians here at ASU is something we've wanted to do. And so I think this, gives us more context into how we might think through bringing in and contacting our librarians.
Should I say what we do here at OSU? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so here at OSU, we also have competitive intelligence group that now we call strategic intelligence in mapping unit. We sit inside the Office of Research, and we adopt the same concept that or definition for competitive intelligence that ASU adopts. But instead of working so much with federal government and grants and proposals and things like that, we tend to work more towards industry engagement with university, and lately with strategic planning. So our competitive intelligence is mostly directed to those two areas, although we are trying to do more on the federal side. What else I was going to say that I kind of forgot right now, but that's it. So competitive for us, we don't use the library, what is a shame. But in terms of bibliometrics, we do rely heavily on publication analysis and bibliometrics. It's one of our standard offerings is social network analysis, bibliometrics, and impact of publications. That's my 2 cents.
Brian, I just wanted to point to a chat that Rebecca Bryant just sent in case you didn't, just to make sure you see it.
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. And actually, I'll draw everyone's attention to that as Rebecca's sharing a link to a discussion that OCLC's research support group recently had. Rebecca, I invite you to chime in here.
Yeah, I've unmuted myself now. So, hi, I'm Rebecca Bryant, and I work as a program officer with OCLC. If you're in the library community, you're probably very familiar with OCLC. If you're not, you wouldn't have heard of OCLC, but it's the Online Computer Library Center based in Columbus, Ohio. And we provide a lot of, we're a nonprofit organization providing a lot of resources, products, services, metadata support for the library community worldwide. Most people point to OCLC and our maintenance of WorldCat, usually is the thing that they might be most familiar with. I'm positioned in our research unit, so I conduct research on libraries, specifically research institution libraries, and also lead sort of group discussion with those libraries, about 130 libraries worldwide. And I'll put a little more in chat about that. But we're currently conducting some research on institutional stakeholders in research support. Understanding that libraries have a role to play, other units have a role to play, and how do these units most effectively work together? And the question earlier about how do I find that person is exactly sort of symptomatic of this, is that there's a lot of emergence happening. I'm going to put another thing in the link here. I will be at NORDIP presenting on some work that we're doing. Also some of my other work related to research information management or RIM or CRIS systems. So I welcome the opportunity to connect with people there.
Great, thank you. That's excellent to have the resources that you're sharing, Rebecca. Thank you for doing that. It looks as though Jonathan Barber at ASU has also shared some information here.
Yeah, hey Ryan, this has been very informative. Thank you for doing this. So our Knowledge Enterprise Office, which is the research arm of the university, got together with the library starting early last year to try and expand the role, specifically for allowing researchers to come up with data management plans and make their research data sets available to the wider research community. And that has kind of expanded into the library doing a full-on support for researchers all the way through their research life cycle, from identifying opportunities to doing their literature reviews, coming up with data management plans, finalizing and dealing with their long-term data storage stuff. So this is all very new to us, but it's been very interesting. Little background for me, I have an MLS. I was library faculty for 10 years. I'm now data intelligence person in the Knowledge Enterprise group. So this kind of bridges both worlds for me. So this is really cool to hear. But that page gives kind of an overview of what it is that we're trying to accomplish and where we point our research community to try and get started. So if people just want to take a look at it, we'd love to get any feedback. I can pass that along to the person in our Knowledge Enterprise group who is now heading up this initiative. We had talked about how to identify the correct individual. It appears that we have come up with the title of Liaison and Research Data Liaison Librarians. And this is literally the first time I've seen that. So, but it's nice to have somebody specifically in those roles that the PIs can reach out to. So just wanted to share it so people could see what we're doing. Like I said, it's very new. So.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. That's nice to have out there.
Hey, Brian, I have a comment. Alba here at OSU again. This was actually very interesting because I like the part where you talk about the skills and how those skills will intersect with, can intersect with competitive intelligence. Because we would like to hire someone else, but librarians wasn't in my on my radar as a profile for a person. But now I see that they would have a lot of skills that could support what we do. If we think of those skills, for example, in scoping the problem and you know, summarizing this information as final report to our customers, etc. So I thought it was very good information personally for me. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Alba, and I agree. And the literature that I stumbled across, well, didn't stumble across, I very much searched for it. It was nice to see it in print, reinforcing some of my thought there. Getting that connection between librarianship and intelligence work is not something that I've explicitly already seen or came across. I'm still searching, so hope to maybe find where somebody else has made that connection, and if I do, I'll share that over.
Oh, that's very interesting because when we design a profile of someone we would like to hire, it has to be a person that can navigate the library very well. That's one of our main requests, that it's not shy about exploring databases and sources and understanding the sources, because you have to understand the data that you're actually going to analyze. So that's, I think you are onto something here.
Great, and Rebecca has shared another link and made a note about the interest group that she leads, and that I think might be a great space to also explore and learn more about how librarianship might connect well to the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I just sort of throw that out, and I think Ryan, we're talking next week, so let's see if there might be. I mean, I think one of the big problems is people don't know what the other does or has to offer, and if we can facilitate some of that learning through in NORDIP with the group of research university librarians I work with. That would seem to be a win all the way around. So it's just an opportunity I'm interested in exploring.
Great, I look forward to engaging more around that.
Yeah, I think I'd be interested in engaging more around that as well. Do you mind, I know you said you're doing a talk at NORDIP. Do you mind, there was a email that Karen Walker sent around to the group just advertising some of the NORDIP talks we're doing. If you could share it on that email chain, that would be great. So we can put it, I can mark it down as one to attend.
Okay, I'm not in probably your email stream, but it's also I'm collaborating with Jeff Agnoli and Melissa Edwards.
Great. Okay. I'll look for it then and share it with our group. All right. Are there any other questions? All right, then I think we'll probably wrap up a little early. Thanks again to Ryan for presenting today. This was one of the presentations that's had the most discussion of the ones we've done, and so I think that just shows what an interesting topic and avenue for us to continue exploring. Our next presentation is March 24th, and that'll be on elicitation. We have a presenter from industry coming to give that talk, and so I think that'll be a really interesting viewpoint for us all. She is kind of a competitive intelligence guru, I would say. She's been doing this for a really long time. And so we'll hear from Ellen Naylor next month.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for giving me the space to start exploring this, too. Again, information. So I have my contact info here. I'd love to hear from you, and would love to get some ideas as to how this might be valuable to you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Jamie and Ryan.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Albo.
I'll see you guys.
Great. Thank you. Be well.
Bye.